On October 26, 1942, the USS Hornet disappeared in the turbulent waters of the South Pacific after a fierce battle against Japanese forces. What the United States Navy did not expect was that 82 years later, a team of marine explorers would make a discovery that would rewrite naval history books. The legendary aircraft carrier had been found, perfectly preserved on the ocean floor, guarding secrets that no one imagined existed. The USS Hornet was no ordinary battleship. Launched in December 1940, it became one of the most important aircraft carriers in the American fleet during World War II. Its fame began in April 1942, when it served as the platform for the audacious Doolittle raid, the first American bombing operation over Japanese territory. 16 B-25 bombers took off from its deck on a mission considered impossible, bringing the war directly to the heart of the Empire of the Rising Sun. That operation not only boosted American morale after the attack on Pearl Harbor, but also proved to the world that the United States was ready to fight back. In the following months, the Hornet participated in the crucial Battle of Midway, where the American Navy inflicted a devastating defeat on the Japanese fleet, changing the course of the war in the Pacific. The aircraft carrier and its crew became symbols of courage and determination, facing a relentless enemy in waters far from home. Each mission was a demonstration of bravery, each takeoff from the swaying deck a challenge to gravity and fate. But the Hornet's glory would have a tragic end. In October 1942, during the Battle of the Santa Cruz Islands, the ship was attacked by a relentless wave of Japanese aircraft. Torpedoes pierced its hull, bombs exploded on its deck, and kamikaze pilots launched their aircraft against the carrier's structure in desperate suicide attacks. Despite the crew's heroic efforts to save the ship, the Hornet was doomed. With the ship engulfed in flames and listing dangerously, the order to abandon ship was given. American destroyers attempted to sink it to prevent it from falling into enemy hands, firing torpedoes and shells at the hull. When this failed, the Japanese took over, launching more torpedoes against the dying giant. Finally, the USS Hornet slid beneath the waves, taking with it tales of heroism and sacrifice to the depths of the Pacific Ocean. For decades, the Hornet remained lost, a submerged legend in the dark waters more than 5,000 meters deep. War veterans told stories about the ship, families mourned the sailors who went down with it, and historians debated its exact location. The aircraft carrier became one of the great naval mysteries of World War II, a ghost of the past waiting to be rediscovered. Previous expeditions had attempted to locate it without success, facing the immense technical difficulties of searching the ocean floor in such a vast and deep area. Everything changed in January 2019, when the team of billionaire Paul Allen, co-founder of Microsoft, boarded the research vessel Petrel, equipped with state-of-the-art sonar technology and autonomous underwater vehicles. Allen had dedicated years and significant resources to the search for lost warships, driven by a deep passion for naval history. His team had previously located other famous ships, including the Japanese battleship Musashi and the cruiser USS Indianapolis. Now, they were determined to find the Hornet. Using detailed historical records, survivor accounts, and precise calculations of ocean currents, the team narrowed the search area in the waters around the Solomon Islands. After days of systematically scanning the seabed, the Petrel sonar detected a large, distinctive object. Remotely operated underwater vehicles were sent to investigate, their cameras slowly descending through the absolute darkness of the depths. What they revealed left the team speechless. There, resting vertically on the ocean floor at a depth of over 5,400 meters, was the USS Hornet. The number 8 painted on its hull was clearly visible, confirming its identity beyond any doubt. The aircraft carrier was surprisingly well preserved, considering 8 decades beneath the sea. Its superstructure, though covered in sediment and marine life, remained intact. Battle marks were evident, Torpedo holes perforated the hull, and bomb damage marked the deck, silent witnesses to the violence of its final days. The images captured by the underwater vehicles were impressive and moving. Anti-aircraft guns still pointed to the sky, as if still defending the ship against phantom attackers. Parts of the flight deck remained recognizable, the same deck from which the Doolittle Raiders had taken off years before on their historic mission. The bridge, where Captain Charles Mason had given the order to abandon ship, remained as a monument to those who had served there. For historians and veterans, seeing these images was like opening a time capsule, a direct window into one of the most crucial moments in American history. The discovery of the Hornet was not only a technological triumph, but also a profoundly emotional moment. Of the more than 2,000 crewmen who served on the aircraft carrier during its short operational life, 140 men died when the ship sank. Their stories, their sacrifices, and their courage now had a physical place of remembrance. Surviving crew members, many already in their 90s, received the news with tears and gratitude. Finally, the final resting place of their comrades had been found and could be properly honored. The Hornet was not just metal and machines. It was a war grave, a memorial to those who gave their lives for their country. The ship's precise location was disclosed to the United States Navy, but the exact coordinates were kept confidential to protect the site from treasure hunters and looters. Under international and American law, the USS Hornet is the property of the United States government and is protected as a military heritage site. Any disturbance of the ship or removal of artifacts is strictly prohibited. The Hornet will remain in the depths as an untouched memorial, an underwater sanctuary where those who rest there can remain in peace. The discovery also provided naval historians with new insights into the battle that took the Hornet out of service. Extensive footage of the ship revealed details about the damage it sustained, allowing for a clearer understanding of the sequence of attacks and the aircraft carrier's surprising resilience. Even after multiple torpedo hits, bombs, and a direct kamikaze attack, the Hornet refused to sink quickly, giving the crew precious time to evacuate. This resilience saved hundreds of lives and demonstrated the excellent American naval engineering of the time. The legacy of the USS Hornet extends beyond its service in World War II. Its role in the Doolittle raid remains one of the most audacious episodes in American military history. That mission, while causing limited physical damage to Japan, had an enormous psychological impact. It forced the Japanese High Command to maintain forces defending the main islands, resources that could have been used elsewhere. It also directly led to the Japanese decision to attack Midway, where their fleet would suffer a defeat from which it would never fully recover. For Paul Allen, who passed away in October 2018, just months before the discovery of the Hornet, this would have been one of his greatest triumphs. His passion for preserving naval history and honoring those who served continued through his team even after his death. The discovery was dedicated to his memory and his vision of ensuring that the sacrifices of those who fought in the world wars would never be forgotten. Today, the USS Hornet rests silently in the depths of the Pacific, but its story continues to resonate. Museums dedicated to World War II use images of its discovery to educate new generations about the cost of freedom. Veterans and their families finally have closure, knowing that the ship and those who went down with it have been found and are being honored. The aircraft carrier that once dominated the skies of the Pacific now serves a different, but equally important, purpose as a silent teacher of history, courage, and sacrifice. The USS Hornet may have been swallowed up by war 82 years ago, but its reappearance has ensured that its legacy will live on forever. The discovery of the Hornet opened a new era in naval archaeology and in how we view wartime shipwrecks. The technology that allowed the aircraft carrier to be found at a depth of over 5,000 meters represents an extraordinary leap compared to the capabilities available just a decade earlier. The autonomous underwater vehicles used by the Petrel crew can operate for hours at the most extreme depths, mapping the ocean floor with centimeter precision and capturing high-definition images where sunlight never penetrates. These technological advances not only allow us to find lost ships, but also to study them without disturbing them, preserving their integrity as underwater memorials. The impact of the discovery reverberated far beyond military and historical circles. Families who for generations had kept letters, photographs, and memories of the men who served on the Hornet were finally able to connect those personal memories to a physical place. Grandchildren and great-grandchildren of crewmen who never knew their grandfathers now had concrete images of the ship where they served, fought, and in some cases, died. Memorial ceremonies were held, with survivors and descendants gathering to honor those whose final resting place had been revealed after so long. The remarkably well-preserved condition of the Hornet at such depths raises fascinating questions about how the ocean floor environment affects shipwrecks. The extreme pressure and consistently cold temperature at such depths create conditions that, paradoxically, may preserve metallic structures better than shallow waters. The absence of strong currents, sunlight, and abundant oxygen significantly slows corrosion and the growth of organisms that would normally rapidly deteriorate a shipwreck. The Hornet, resting on a bed of soft mud, is protected from the destructive forces that would affect a ship in shallower waters. Marine scientists studying images of the Hornet were particularly intrigued by the ship's upright position on the seabed. This unusual orientation provides valuable clues about how the aircraft carrier sank. Evidence suggests that, after receiving multiple torpedo and bomb damage, the Hornet began to fill with water unevenly. As it sank, the weight distribution changed drastically, causing the ship to rotate and descend bow first at a steep angle. The final journey to the bottom would have taken hours, with the Hornet sliding through the increasingly dark and cold layers of the ocean until finally landing vertically on the seabed. The discovery also rekindled public interest in the Battle of the Santa Cruz Islands, one of the most violent and least known naval engagements in the Pacific. In that battle, fought in October 1942, American and Japanese forces clashed in a desperate duel for control of the sea lanes around Guadalcanal. Both sides suffered heavy losses, but the Japanese lost so many experienced pilots that they never fully recovered their aerial combat capability. The sacrifice of the Hornet and its crew contributed to the strategic victory, although the price was terribly high. Among the most poignant stories related to the Hornet is that of Captain Charles Mason, who commanded the ship during its final battle. Witnesses recount that Mason refused to leave the bridge until he was absolutely certain that all crew members who could be saved had abandoned ship. He remained on the Hornet even as flames consumed the deck and the ship began to list dangerously. Only when subordinate officers convinced him that there was nothing more that could be done did Mason finally relinquish his command. He survived the war and lived until 1983, but carried the loss of his ship and his men for the rest of his life. Another fascinating aspect of the Hornet story is the fate of the aircraft that were aboard when the ship sank. Many aircraft were still in the hangar or tethered to the deck when the order to abandon ship was given. These aircraft, including Wildcat fighters and Dauntless dive bombers, went down with the ship and now rest scattered around the main hull or still attached to the wreckage. For aviation historians, these preserved aircraft represent technological time capsules, perfectly preserved examples of the aerial weaponry that decided the fate of the war in the Pacific. The discovery of the Hornet also brought to light individual stories of heroism that had been partially forgotten over time. The aircraft carrier's crew included men from all corners of the United States, from farms in the Midwest to port cities on the East Coast. Many were volunteers who enlisted immediately after Pearl Harbor, driven by a sense of patriotic duty. Others were career sailors who had dedicated their lives to naval service. All shared the belief that they were fighting for something greater than themselves, defending not only their country, but the principles of freedom and democracy against the forces of tyranny. Underwater footage revealed surprising details that had not been documented in historical records. Machine gun marks in various parts of the superstructure indicate how close Japanese planes came during their attacks. Damage caused by friendly fire from American destroyers that attempted to sink the Hornet is clearly visible. Silent testimony to the difficult decision to destroy one's own ship to avoid capture. Parts of the Hornet's radar system, cutting-edge technology for its time, are still recognizable, offering researchers the opportunity to study electronic warfare systems that rarely survive intact. The Petrel team took extreme care during the exploration to ensure the site remained untouched. The underwater vehicles were operated with surgical precision, maintaining a safe distance from the ship to avoid any physical contact. No artifacts were removed, no part of the ship was touched. The only things brought to the surface were terabytes of video and sonar data, digital records that allow the world to see the Hornet without disturbing its final rest. This rigorous non-intervention protocol has set a standard for future explorations of military shipwreck sites. The interest generated by the discovery of the Hornet led to a broader resurgence in the study of naval warfare in the Pacific. Universities began offering new courses on the naval history of World War II, museums expanded their exhibits on the war in the Pacific, and documentary filmmakers produced detailed programs about the naval battles that changed the course of the conflict. The story of the Hornet became a powerful educational tool, a tangible narrative that connects modern students to the events that shape the world we live in. For the Japanese, the discovery of the Hornet also held significance. Many Japanese pilots who attacked the aircraft carrier that October day also lost their lives in the battle. Their families, like the American ones, carried the pain of loss for decades. The discovery of the Hornet serves as a reminder that war brings suffering to all sides, and that honoring the fallen does not mean glorifying the conflict, but rather learning from it to prevent similar tragedies from happening again. The digital preservation of the Hornet represents one of the most complete documentations ever made of a World War II aircraft carrier wreck. Three-dimensional models generated from sonar data allow researchers to examine every inch of the ship without ever diving into its depths. Students can take virtual tours of the Hornet, digitally walking through the same corridors where crewmen rushed to their battle stations more than 8 decades ago. This technology ensures that, even if the ship itself eventually succumbs to corrosion and time, a perfect representation of it will exist forever. The legacy of the USS Hornet extends to the American space program as well. Decades after the battleship sank, another USS Hornet, an Essex-class aircraft carrier designated CV-12 and named in honor of the lost ship, served as a recovery ship for the Apollo missions. It was the deck of the Hornet CV-12 that welcomed Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins when they returned from their historic journey to the moon in 1969. This continuity of service, from naval combat to space exploration, symbolizes the American evolution from conflict to the peaceful conquest of new frontiers. The community of survivors of the original Hornet, though dwindling in numbers with each passing year, has remained united through decades. They held annual reunions, shared memories, and worked to ensure that the story of their ship was not forgotten. The discovery of the wreckage validated their efforts to preserve the memory and gave them a final gift: visual confirmation that the ship to which they had dedicated so much of their lives still existed, not just in their memories, but physically resting on the ocean floor. The psychological impact of the discovery cannot be underestimated. For many veterans, sinking the Hornet was a trauma they carried for life. Seeing the ship again, even through underwater images, brought a complex mix of emotions. There was sadness for the loss and the lives taken, but there was also pride in the service rendered and gratitude for having survived. Some veterans described the experience of seeing the images as a kind of closure, A final opportunity to say goodbye to the ship and the comrades they left behind on that terrible October day. The story of the USS Hornet, from its glorious launch to its silent rediscovery in the depths, encapsulates a fundamental truth about human memory and our relationship with the past. The ship spent more time resting on the ocean floor than it ever sailed its surface waters, slowly transforming from a war machine into a living monument to history. Each layer of sediment that settles on its hull is like a page being turned, marking the inexorable passage of time while the world above continues to change in ways its original crew could never have imagined. The last survivors of the Hornet are now in their 100th year or have already passed away, carrying with them sensory memories that no photograph or documentary can fully capture. The smell of diesel oil mixed with salt water, the vibration of catapults launching planes at dawn, the suffocating heat of the compartments below deck, the deafening roar of aircraft engines, the camaraderie forged under extreme pressure. These lived experiences are fading from direct human memory, replaced by second- and third-hand accounts, digital images, and historical reconstructions that, however accurate, can never fully replicate the lived reality. What makes the discovery of the Hornet particularly significant is not just what was found, but what it represents about our collective need to remember. In a time when global conflicts may seem remote or abstract to many, the Hornet offers a tangible connection to a time when entire nations mobilized every available resource for a common cause. The ship serves as a physical reminder that the peace and freedom enjoyed by billions today were bought with real sacrifice, measurable in lives lost, families shattered, and futures never realized. The waters around the Solomon Islands hold dozens of other ships from both sides of the conflict, each with its own story of courage and tragedy. The Hornet is not alone in its watery grave. It rests in the company of destroyers, cruisers, submarines, and cargo ships, forming an underwater cemetery that stretches for hundreds of square kilometers. Together, these wrecks tell the story of a brutal campaign that decided the fate of nations and shaped the post-war world order. They are silent witnesses to a period in which humanity demonstrated both its capacity for destructive violence and its resilience and determination. The technology that enabled the discovery of the Hornet continues to evolve, promising more discoveries to come. Hundreds of World War II ships remain lost, their final resting places known only approximately or completely unknown. Each future discovery will bring its own stories, its own moments of reconnection between past and present. But there is something particularly poetic about the Hornet specifically. A ship that took the war to the enemy on one of history's most audacious missions and now rests in the same waters it once patrolled, transformed from a warrior into a guardian of memories. The generations born after the war, and especially those born in the new millennium, face the challenge of keeping alive the memory of events that occurred long before their time. The Hornet offers a bridge across this temporal abyss. It is not just a story in a book or a sequence in a documentary. It is a real, immense, and impressive object that exists in a specific place and can be visited, even if only through robotic cameras. Its continued existence in the depths challenges the human tendency to forget, to allow the past to fade into the mists of distant history. There is also a philosophical dimension to the discovery that deserves contemplation. The Hornet sank into a world where television was still a novelty, where computers occupied entire rooms, where the idea of sending humans to the moon seemed like science fiction. The world that rediscovered the ship is a radically different place, connected by the internet, shaped by decades of relative peace between great powers, transformed by technological revolutions that would have seemed magical to those who served on the aircraft carrier. And yet, the principles for which they fought, freedom, justice, resistance against tyranny, remain as relevant as they were in that distant October of 1942. The ocean, in its indifferent vastness, preserved the Hornet not as an act of reverence, but simply as a consequence of its physical properties. There is no intention in the preservation, no inherent meaning in the fact that the ship survived relatively intact. It is we, the living, who invest these wreckage with meaning, who transform corroded metal and flooded compartments into symbols of something greater. This is the essence of collective memory, the human capacity to take material objects and infuse them with narratives, values, and lessons that transcend their purely physical existence. When the last veterans of World War II depart, and that day is inexorably approaching, places like the Hornet's resting place will become even more important. They will be the only remaining physical testimonies, the last objects that can directly connect us to that transformative period. Yellowed letters will disintegrate, photographs will fade, films will deteriorate despite our best preservation efforts. But the Hornet, protected by the pressure and darkness of the depths, will endure for centuries beyond living memory, an unwitting memorial that will continue to exist long after all who knew it have passed away. The decision to leave the ship untouched on the seabed, rather than attempting to recover it or artifacts, reflects a growing maturity in how we handle underwater heritage. There is wisdom in recognizing that some things are more valuable left where they are, that disturbing the dead and their monuments in the name of curiosity or even education can be a form of desecration. The Hornet best serves humanity as it is, an untouched sanctuary that we can observe but not possess, a place of memory that exists beyond the reach of commercialism and exploitation. In the decades and centuries to come, when the Second World War has receded even further into the past, when it has become as distant as the Civil War or the Napoleonic Wars seem to us today, the Hornet will still be there. Future generations, with technologies we can scarcely imagine, will be able to visit and study it in ways we cannot yet conceive. They will look at it with the same fascination and reverence we feel when examining Viking ships or Spanish galleons, as a window to a lost world, a material testament to how their ancestors lived, fought, and sometimes died. The USS Hornet now rests in perpetual silence, surrounded by the absolute darkness of the abyssal depths, protected by the weight of miles of water above it. No sound reaches it except the occasional click of sonar equipment or the hum of a passing robotic underwater vehicle. There is no light except that which we carry with us. There is no movement except the slow settling of sediments and the occasional drift of deep currents. It is a place of absolute stillness, fitting for a memorial, a place where those who rest there can do so undisturbed, guarded by the same waters they once sailed, protected by the depths that swallowed them, remembered by generations who never knew them but who still acknowledge their debt.